The train headed for Sunset City will be departing soon.
Welcome back to Sunset City, a Sonic podcast for the modern and classic age. Today you have me, Nick, as well as the tall lady vampire who will chase you around an old castle while you say, "Chase me!" known as Cirrus.
I have a feeling I should have 3 daughters now.
Well, you do have that, and you also have a scroungy dogman brother known as Channel Pup.
Indeed.
So, today we're going to be discussing, we're going to be doing a retrospective on Sonic 1, but before we do that, there are a couple little bits of news, nothing we really have to spend a whole lot of time on, but all the same, we should probably mention it for the sake of mentioning it. First one, we already knew about a Sonic Encyclopedia, and considering the art book and the history of Sonic the Hedgehog got deluxe editions, it's not too surprising to learn that we're getting a deluxe edition of the encyclopedia, and it's like twice the price of the normal edition, and I think all you're getting is a few extra pages and a new cover, and of course I pre-ordered it.
Awesome. Well, I decided not to order it because that's $80, and I want to get the IDW hardcover as well, and that I can't afford both of those things.
Well, they're both being published by Dark Horse, aren't they? Oh, I'm sorry. You mean the IDW, the comic. I got you.
Yeah, because we're getting the IDW hardcover. We already knew about that one. That one's not news. We know we're getting it's the first 12 volumes plus the annuals all together in one thing. And I want to get that, but that's $40-something. And then the base version of the encyclopedia is $40-something. But then it's $80. It's about $80 for the full version. I commend you on getting the full version, but I want both of my books, so I will spend the same money you did and get both of my books.
And
I don't
will spend more and get all of them because I'm a weirdo. Sorry,
I don't
go ahead.
really. No, it's fine. I don't really have the money to spend on these Sonic books, so I'm just hoping you'll do like a speed reading or something of the Encyclopedia, isn't it called, or something? Well,
it might be. Yeah, no, we'll definitely. I'm thinking I'm probably gonna do like a live reading of finding any interesting facts, and some of our Sonic Tube friends who focus on news and tidbits. I mean, just Ian Flynn mentioning that the Chaos Emeralds have some sort of an origin. I mean, we had like 3 to 5 videos that day. I can't even imagine what's going to happen once that book actually drops. We're just going to be scouring for little factoids here and there.
Read me a bedtime story, Uncle Nick.
But yeah, I'll probably read through it and just give my an actual review. Then we'll probably just talk about any factoids on this show because I don't really do Sonic news on my channel. But Pup, you might find something interesting worth talking about.
In the book?
In the encyclopedia, probably.
Maybe. Unless they're talking about the origins of rings, I'm not really sure, but like sure.
But
you know what I
imagine
realized?
Imagine if they do. Imagine if the book comes out and it debunks all of.
Don't say it.
Don't say
resist it. Resist saying the B word.
You cut Darren. That's a beautiful joke. Well done.
I'm sorry.
Do you know, like, I was mentioning Ian Flynn, like, his show is called the Bumblecast, right?
What?
Damn
okay,
it.
we're not. No, we are not going into this today.
Have you guys been conspiring for this the whole time? Have you guys been talking behind the scenes?
I hate to say this. Nick, but well, I think that confirms it. Pup, I hate you.
Hooray!
I know what this actually is. This has just been a long form Honey Nut Cheerios commercial. I know what this is.
It's been 11 episodes of talking about a blue hedgehog, all for this.
I need to tell you, I am Ian Flynn. Always have been.
You're not Ian Flynn. You're being.
You know, you do have the proportions of that fucking cereal bee. So
I'm
watching
Ian,
you, Felt Man.
being flying.
He's being flying.
Swear to God.
Look, I know they've said that
Okay.
the Sonic fandom has a hive mind, but come on.
Okay, enough with
No, we
enough
don't.
with
We do
theory.
not have a hive mind. We are a mess. We are a collective garbage fire is what we are. But we do have a little bit more news. It might not be Sonic related completely, but that Summer Games thing or whatever it's called that Jeff Keighley hosts or attempted to, I guess he started it last year with the pandemic hitting and E3 being what it was. It sounds like Sega is going to be appearing in that. So I'm curious because we know E3 is happening, we know Summer Games is happening, and it's going to be Sonic's birthday month next month. Like, do you think it behooves Sega to be announcing Sonic related material during these other events that are happening in June, or do they just have to keep their cards close to their chest and just try to do what they've done before, which is try to sell to the hardcore audience in exclusive events?
I think it probably behooves them to sprinkle bits of information about possible products, like basically wet people's tongues at events like that before then going into a main event and going, okay, and now here's the big reveal based on everything you've been doing. I think, especially with the Sonic fandom being as chomping at the bit, is probably the best way I could describe it right now, for a new Sonic game, or even just information about a new Sonic game. It would definitely behoove them to just kind of lay some breadcrumbs for people to follow and build up that hype so that when they actually do their larger event, then they can go, this is what we've been building up for, which is a double-edged sword. On the one hand, Sega sprinkling breadcrumbs like that, if they do, this is, speculative, if they do, and their reveal ends up being something major, and everybody starts getting freaked out about it, then, that's great publicity. But imagine if they do that sprinkling and then they release effectively, hey guys, we're just doing Forces 2 and Mania 2.
I think it behooves them that they would do like just a tiny tease at the event, but I think we will be getting the main course at some kind of Sonic event on June 25th, wasn't it? That's when Sonic's anniversary is.
23rd.
23rd, bollocks. But yeah, no. So I think maybe we'll get like the announcement that there's something big coming on June 23rd. But I don't think we're gonna get anything major until that.
Yeah, other events is probably just like I said, it's probably best that they just do breadcrumb stuff.
Well, I mean, you guys are still looking at this as Sonic fans. Like, if you're looking at this as like the general gaming audience, they're not going to give a shit about breadcrumbs at E3. Like, why are you teasing another Sonic game? Of course, another Sonic game's coming. Like, they're not that great. We don't give a shit. Just show your game in a trailer or get the fuck out. What are you doing? Like, we're not going to be tuning into your, your Sonic exclusive event. So, I think it's one or the other. Honestly, I think they've had the convenience of having Sonic's celebrations prior to E3 in the past, so they can make the big announcements there and then do like a follow-up trailer for E3. I don't think they have that this time around. I think the most they'll have, like that leak suggests, would be like showing off Sonic colors, and that would be about it. If they're going to be doing like a lot of Sonic product at once, I think it would still probably be best for them to wait till they have a big announcement. Otherwise, yeah, if they're doing a port, like something that's that's pretty positively remembered by mainstream gaming media or general gaming audiences, I think the Colors Remaster would be safe to drop around that time. That's when you start showing off the little tidbits here and there, and and then on like Sonic social media, you say, hey, here's when the Sonic event is happening, if it is at all, because it's getting kind of late in the month in May. Like, they need to start rolling out like when things are going to be announced, if nothing else.
I mean, there's that, and the pandemic might have changed things a little bit. I mean, when they had their announcement event on the 23rd of June in 2016, I think it was, when they announced Sonic Forces, they had a whole event at like I think it was the House of Blues, if I'm not mistaken, with Crush
Hmm.
40 and everyone there. With the pandemic, they're not going to be doing that. So it might be that they're just like, okay, scrap the 23rd. We'll just do it at E3. So there's a possibility they could,
I
but I would
mean,
say at latest maybe June 23rd.
so here's my take on that one though. I agree that they're not going to do something as big and stupendous with like a live studio uh concert because of course pandemic safety. It'd be a really bad PR move at the moment to do that, and just there wouldn't be as many people showing up anyway. However, we've been in a pandemic for over a year now. At any
Yeah.
point during this year, Sega could easily have gone, okay, guys, when we do this event, we will obviously not be able to do X, Y, and Z, but can we still do something that makes it seem or feel larger? I don't think they would necessarily skip anything over because of the pandemic, because they've had a year of being able to adapt to what the normal of mid pandemic is.
I mean, that's true. Like, you've had lots of online sort of Comic Con events and stuff. They could have, interviews, live interviews with, like, people like Crush 40 and Kashi Iizuka and stuff like that. Like, they could do something like that. Like, Sega are pretty in tune with the whole internet live entertainment as well. Like, they had the Sonic Generations live stream with Roger Craig Smith quite recently. So, and the Twitter takeovers for another example. So, like, I don't think it's beyond the realm of possibility that we could get a Sonic 30th anniversary event this year on June 23rd. Although I do think it is quite a bit late to start promo on that if they are. Then again, does an online event need as much promo? That's the question.
That's a good point. Yeah, I was wondering that too. Like, I mean, we're again, this is like a two front sort of a thing. I'm wondering about because we know the pandemic absolutely held back on game development itself. If we're talking just in terms of events, um, yeah, what I would do if I had the means to do it, I would do some sort of online events. You don't need to announce that much, but the fan base does need to know what is happening at this point. Like it's I get you want to hold off on stuff if you have like a lot of surprises. So if they do have a lot of surprises to show off, then yes, you need to make a big stink about it after all this time. Otherwise, I mean, you do prove everyone. I mean, you validate everybody's frustrations with not being more upfront with what's going on. If there have been like severe development issues, but I would drop a trailer for Colors. I would tease the next big Sonic thing. I would probably drop a trailer for Prime if Netflix was cool with that. And if they had a trailer ready for the movie, again, you need to work with it's Paramount, right? That's making the movie.
Yeah,
I believe it's
yeah.
Paramount, yes.
They could have like a short tease or something, like just of footage that they've got prepared. It might not be anything with Sonic in it because I believe they're still shooting, so animation might not have necessarily began for Sonic. But like
I mean, they could have animated a teaser at this point easily.
I guess. I mean, I would imagine something a bit more Dr. Robotnik centric. I would imagine.
Sure.
Yeah,
Just
because
quite a
that
big
would be
draw about the
live
previous one as
action.
well.
Yeah, it wouldn't take as much work as creating.
It'd be much more expensive if you had to give Jim Carrey like a
Well, no,
specifically
they
like
they could use like existing footage, just mash it together to make a quick little stinger of Dr. Robotnik in this movie. Because like he was quite a big draw about the previous one, Jim Carrey, and like with this one, we know he's going to get like a new design and everything. So like showing off that progression, that's going to be one of the major changes from movie 1 to movie 2. Is now we've got this more classic looking Robotnik. So
yeah.
I would imagine whatever we see of that movie, if it's going to be anytime soon, it's not going to be quite as Sonic centric yet. It's probably going to be a bit more leaning more on Dr. Robotnik. But then again, I might be completely wrong because they had all sorts of little animated bits made just for promo in the previous movie. Such as, when we saw adult or teen Sonic running through Green Hill, that was clearly just made for the trailer. So,
Yeah.
So I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they're also animating simultaneously to filming. I mean, it's two different departments, so I could be wrong.
Yeah, I mean, like if they're just stretching their legs, like there's obviously animation ready to go right now, and like if it's specifically a teaser, then yeah, you can't drop that at E3 or Summer of Games. Like you'd have to do a Sonic event. If you just drop like the official render of Knuckles, fans are gonna be happy.
Yeah.
But I would use this time to answer some burning questions that fans are wanting to know. That being, as far as American or Western side is concerned, who's the new voice of Sonic? What's Knuckles look like in the new movie? And what's the next big game? If you drop those three, you're going to have a very happy fan base.
Imagine if the announcement is, by the way, Ben Schwartz is going to be our video game Sonic now as well.
Yeah, that would everyone would freak out. People would freak out.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would break the internet.
And I don't even know if I would necessarily hate that decision because I didn't mind him in the movie.
I'd be fine with it. I see Game Sonic and Movie Sonic as two different things, but I think Ben Schwartz is also pretty versatile. So I reckon he could nail the game Sonic as well. I mean, as I've said before, he's the closest thing we've had to a Ryan Drummond Sonic since Ryan Drummond Sonic, because like his voice is just quite similar to that fit, if you get me.
Yeah, but I mean, if you're going to be going down the route of Schwartz, like you need to be spending the money on the writers too. You need sharp, witty writers. So
yeah, you don't want Schwartz.
I would assume
you don't want Schwartz getting the same scripts that Roger has been getting.
No, you want people that have been working on the stuff that Schwartz has been on already. You want the DuckTales team on that, or the comic team. You want people that can write comedy and are familiar with his voice. So I mean, all of that is just as important as the voice itself. So I would be a little bit more upfront with that. If they have a game plan going, get it out there, or if they need to release a smaller 2D game in the meantime while they continue to work on whatever the next big Sonic thing is, fine, but get it out there. And I think people need more than a colors port. But that's just me. We're getting off onto a long tangent that's not even having to do with our main topic for the day.
I mean, it's still interesting though, because we did know that Sega said that they were going to try to pull the movie and game franchises just a little bit closer together. And it would make sense after an announcement like that to go, okay, and the way we're going to do this is by having Ben Schwartz as our Sonic and having our writing team write for a Ben Schwartz Sonic and not a Roger Sonic.
Yeah.
I just hope that they do, like you said, I hope they would put somebody on that job. Because like even with Roger, when he was given scripts for the Boom cartoon, he was able to flourish in that environment versus what scripts he was given for the games. I would hope it wouldn't turn into Ben Schwartz gets one type of script when he's doing, say, Sonic Prime, and when he's doing the movie, and it's wonderful, and then he's given this mediocre, half-baked nonsense when he's doing the game. When this is primarily a video game character, you'd think that's where the polish would be.
I mean, that said, like, the games have never, ever been the pride of writing when it comes to Sonic. Like, there's always been some other medium that gets the writing better. So, I don't know how realistic it is to expect the games to suddenly go from, like, janky-ass writing to suddenly being, like, good by any standard writing. Like, that's the thing. Like, I think a lot of people are saying, God, I hope the writing gets good. But it's like, I don't think the writing for Sonic games has ever been good on like a typical standard, just enjoyable for different reasons, if you understand where I'm coming from there. And I'm saying that as someone that loves a lot of Sonic stories, like Sonic Adventure 2, Sonic Unleashed. They have big ideas, but the writing is still, it's always got that Sonic stench to it. As far as writing goes.
it's not that you're wrong, and you're certainly right, but I think the statement, people shouldn't expect Sonic stories to suddenly get good, like the writing to suddenly get good. Thing is that those stories don't have to organically evolve. because stories like that only organically get better if you're using the same team, and that same writing team is just getting better at writing a type of Sonic. If you uplift that and move it to a different writing team, their different writing style will automatically be, well, something different. It may be a lot better, it could be a lot worse, but you only have this problem of this thing is not going to suddenly get better if you stick with the same team and you're trying to fix problems internally within the same team. If they are moving to a different writing team, then you're rolling the die on that completely. It could be infinitely better, or it could be, well, we've seen how low it can go.
I mean,
Well,
I think like the difference between like the previous Sonic writers and then moving over to Pontac and Graf, it's a completely different selection of problems, really. Like, I don't think, like, I prefer the more shonen style stories to the more Saturday morning cartoon ones, but like, I don't think they like integrally better for any reason. I just think it's a completely different set of problems. But regardless of like who the writers are, there's typically always going to be that Sonic stench on video game Sonic stories, and it's fine. I love that stench.
He loves the Sonic stench.
I'm kind of a kinky Sonic pervert in that regard, but like,
he wants Sonic to take off his shoes, guys.
So I'd only push back because Pontac and Graf's, I would say most fans would agree, like the worst of the scripts is going to be Sonic Forces, and I feel more of that has to do with the shift in tone that Sonic Team wanted to take, without really, while using the people they hired to write these more lighthearted Sonic stories. In that realm, as corny as it is, I do think those scripts work fine for what they are. It's definitely more kid friendly, and it is more westernized than the adventure era of games. And I agree with you, Pup. I think it is like a whole set of new problems, because I think a lot of the problems when it comes to the adventure scripts, as silly and convoluted as they are, when you put it through the filter of like Japanese anime, it's still silly, but it's a more fitting silly. And when you localize it, it somehow gets cornier and more nonsensical.
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
I think that's the other thing is like the adventure game storylines. They're silly. They don't make a lot of sense. They've got tons of like really gaping holes in the story that don't even make sense within the game's own logic. But at the same time, it doesn't feel like they're talking down to their audience, if you get me. It feels like honest work. Whereas I guess like the Pontac and Graf era, it feels often like it's really, really talking down to this character and talking down to its audience.
The Pontac and Graf scripts feel very hello, fellow kids.
Yeah.
Well,
so
I mean, that is adults trying to write for kids, though,
I still kind of see it as the Pontac and Graf era in a lot of areas is more appropriate. So, like, I don't care for the story of Sonic Colors or Sonic Generations, but I'd say on a whole, it's appropriate. It fits these characters.
I'm fine with them. Yeah.
I never ever find myself rewatching the cutscenes for Sonic Generations because there's just nothing there. But it's perfectly appropriate for the game they're trying to do.
Well, holy shit! Oh, sorry, my tortoise is awake. He rammed in my chair.
He wants attention. He wants snuggles, Nick.
No, he wants to be let out. So, I'm gonna do that. Nah, he's fine. He's exploring. Let's do the rest of the show. He'll survive.
Shall we move along to the retrospective?
Let's indeed. We have yet again spent over half an hour talking about the future of Sonic the Hedgehog. This fascinating franchise that this is. Okay, so you gentlemen proposed the idea when we were low on news, like, there's a lot of history here, so why don't we start doing our retrospectives on it, even though we all have, I don't know about you, Sirius, we've talked about Sonic 1 on some level in our YouTube channels at some point.
I've not talked about it on mine, though I did, in preparation for doing this episode, I did a full playthrough of Sonic 1 again, and recorded everything, just in case I wanted to actually talk about Sonic 1 on my gaming channel. So, as of current, it's not true that I've talked about it on my gaming channel, but within a week or two, I might actually be a liar.
Fair enough. Well, be warned, guys, because this is my very first Sonic game. I grew up experiencing what the gaming world was like back when this came out, and I get quite defensive when I hear all these whiny new bloods saying that this is a crappy game. So I will be on the defensive more than likely. So let's see how this goes.
So I grew up with this too, just in a different way. So it's not gonna be me just going, all right, Nick, do you remember your childhood? I'm about to take a dump on it. Like, no, it's not gonna be that.
All the same, I'm the youngest of the group, but Sonic 1 was the first video game I ever played. So, like...
Really?
I've also got that thing deep-rooted into my DNA.
Yeah.
I was more talking about our audience, because, like, dump on my childhood all you want. I'll be more like, no, you idiot child. Let me sit you down, and Grandpa's going to smack you with his cane and tell you how it was.
Do, coming soon.
So we've had Stinky Sonic. We now have caning. How many fetishes is this podcast going to cover?
Caning children, for that matter. Yikes.
That's a thing?
Wait, yes.
I'm asking cat tits. What am I talking about?
Caning is a thing, Nick. It's a thing.
Okay, well, carrying on. So Sonic the Hedgehog #1, as it was called, you can read it right on the title there, was released in 1991. I believe that was worldwide, if I'm not mistaken. That's what I'm seeing here, June 23rd, 1991, at least through Wikipedia. I'm not seeing any arguments otherwise on this all-knowing site. And it released on the Sega Genesis, the Mega Drive, over in the Pups parts.
He got to play Sonic 1 Slow Edition.
Yeah, actually, the PAL version.
Yes, that's right.
This was before they properly optimized PAL Sonic games, so they didn't have this problem with Sonic 2 and 3, but Sonic 1, ever so slightly slower. The main place you notice it is in the music, but I've grown up with the music being slower, and I guess I have a soft spot for it, but I think it definitely benefits, like, for example, Dr. Robotnik's boss theme. Because
when it's slower, it's more menacing.
Yeah, it sounds more sort of calculating, you know?
So for those who are in the audience who might not know, like, why this issue happened, so if memory serves, correct me if I'm wrong, Pup, but CRTs back then all ran at 50 hertz, and because these games were all programmed for 60 hertz CRTs, there was a giant mismatch when they started getting played over on your TVs. They were trying to do 60 frames within a 50 frame amount, and it just wasn't translating right, and that led to slowdown.
Yeah, but I would still say this. I mean, I haven't played it on my Mega Drive for quite some time. I've still got the Mega Drive, I just don't have a compatible TV right now. I don't remember the gameplay feeling slower, just the music, really. But I think it's probably more realistic the gameplay was slower, it's just I remember it differently. However, it was because of the difference in hertz and everything like that. Again, like Sonic 2 and onwards didn't have that issue because they were optimized for the 50 hertz as well when they made the PAL versions. So there's a fun little tidbit. I grew up on a different Sonic 1 from the rest of these guys.
Yep. I literally never grew up on a Sonic 1 cart specifically. I kept interrupting you, Nick. I'm sorry. You go on.
No, it's all good. I mean, yeah, let me just kind of give you guys my I don't really remember when I first saw it. I do remember specific points in my life when I did see it that really kind of stood out to me and like, wow, that's incredible. Because yeah, the cart, like, it all comes together like this beautiful just very tempting package. I remember we were moving to a house in Peoria, Illinois, and we're doing some house walkthroughs, and somebody had in their bedroom a Sega Genesis with the Sonic cart on there, and like the TV wasn't on or anything, like it's a walkthrough, but this distinctly stood out to me because I was like, holy shit, that's an actual Sega Genesis. And like, it's such a sleek and sexy package, and that box art, like, as much as people want to rip apart Greg Martin's Sonic design, like, that box art was just so shiny and inviting, and Sonic is just right there on the front, and he looks like he's
Yes.
just on the top of a little black mountain. Like he just looks like he's in the driver's seat of a really sexy black car when you put it in the top of that machine. It
So
just
I had a very different box art because obviously the PAL version is different.
yeah.
So for the UK and I believe Europe, we had the Japanese Sonic design just stood in front of this very pink, peachy sort of pattern, which has the different Sonic flickies on it, and Dr. Robotnik looking incredibly jolly, sort of faded into the background of the package, and that's printed on the cartridge as well. I have to say I prefer Greg Martin's cover for definite because you actually see Green Hill in there, and it's nice to see how that stage is supposed to look outside of its pixel art form. And I'm also just a bit strange on the whole peach color scheme that they went for in the European version. But
Yeah,
yeah,
it's very like I don't know, like rough drafty, I want to say.
yeah,
I've always felt
yeah.
that
Like
way.
even down to like Dr. Robotnik. Like when you see him on that package, you wouldn't immediately necessarily think villain because he appears to be doing like a little dance on there. He appears to be doing like a little jig. He looks all jolly and stuff. Like when I first saw that, you know, he's got those buttons where his bottoms are. I thought that was eyes, and it was like this weird sort of like lum creature, like the lums from Rayman or something.
So this is the first time I've ever seen the 16-bit cartridge for the PAL version. I'm looking it up now for the very first time. He really does look like he's fucking dancing. He is just this man is just happy to be here, and Sonic's here wrecking his factories.
It's so
Yeah,
strange when you consider, like, when you see him in this game as well, he's got the most sinister version of that boss theme you've ever heard. As well as that,
Oh,
the
yeah.
PAL version, even more sinister. And he comes in with a massive wrecking ball. Like, imagine being a kid, and I don't know, like, it's Christmas Day, your parents have gotten you Sonic the Hedgehog 1. You pick up this game box and you see, there's that jolly Santa Claus looking motherfucker on the box there. I can't wait to see him in the game. And then he just fucking rocks
just
up with
comes
a
in,
wrecking ball trying to murder you. And it's like, oh, okay, I thought he was going to be a lot nicer than he turned out to be. And then he's telling you to try again after you've completed the game just because you didn't 100% it.
You didn't
Yeah,
grab the 6 Chaos Emeralds? Shame.
So, I mean, when it comes to the two box arts, yes, I'm not going to argue with anybody who says that the original Japanese design of classic Sonic is the superior one. Of course it is. It's a fantastic look. But in terms of like representing the game itself, I think Greg Martin captured it just phenomenally. There's a long history of game art not really representing what's actually going on in the package itself. That was the case for a good chunk. I mean, from the Atari up to this point. But even here, like you look at this and you see the inviting spiraling look of Green Hill behind Sonic. That's what you get in the game. It does look that colorful. It does look that inviting. It does have that tropical theme to all of it. And despite whether or not you like that mohawk or not, that Sonic looks like the Sonic sprite.
Yep.
I mean, he doesn't have the smirk on the sprite, but he looks angrier. The shading on him makes him looks like he has a round fucking head and just a one long spike from the side. Like that looks like the video game, and I love it for it.
I have a huge soft spot for Greg Martin's Sonic, not gonna lie. Part of me, I kind of think it's just because of that kind of vanilla factor now, you know? I kind of see Japanese classic Sonic as like the vanilla one, whereas Greg Martin's more like a radical kind of flavored Sonic. I think that kind of leads me to kind of have more of a soft spot, more sort of strong feelings towards the Greg Martin version. I mean, it also might tie in with the fact that I love a lot of what the USA did with Sonic in the 90s. For example, Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog. When I see classic Sonic in that, I think that's my classic Sonic. When I see Dr. Robotnik in that, I think that's my favorite Dr. Robotnik. And very radical difference between that and the Japanese version. But like, I've got a lot of love for the westernized American Sonic, even though I would probably say that maybe the Japanese one's a bit more timeless, I guess. Like you look at Greg Martin's Sonic and think, that's a Sonic, that's a 90s guy.
Yeah, he
right
looks like he's coming right out of the era that he was built for.
Yeah, whereas like the Japanese one, it's like, well, that could come from pretty much any time, be it the 1950s or today. So it's like, I guess I wouldn't argue that on kind of an objective basis. I guess the Japanese one is more something that will stand the test of time. But like, got a lot of love for Greg Martin. Got a lot of love for the '90s style.
Well, that
It's
makes
nostalgia
sense
for me.
though, because I mean, like the original design concept for Sonic was literally, hey, let's make a Mickey Mouse type mascot, but let's give him the attitude of, yeah, at the time it was,
Bart Simpson.
Bill Clinton and Bart Simpson together.
Yeah,
and
Such
that's
a weird combination.
but again,
it worked.
at the time though, like Bill Clinton was like in the '90s, that was like your hit president, and he was everything that made fun of him. It was almost like he was cool with it as well. Like Animaniacs did that in spades. That was just
Every couple decades. Yeah, I mean, he was the Barack Obama of the '90s. I mean,
So wait,
really.
what was I know that people aren't going to want this to get political, so just a short answer is all I need. What party affiliation was Bill Clinton? Was he
Democrat. He's Democrat.
Democrat.
Okay, I was about to say I cannot imagine Republican Sonic.
All right, Eggman, I'm ready to take you down and take over your factory. Wait, that's not what you're supposed to do. That's right. This is Republican Sonic. I'm appropriating your factory.
And that's
We're
why
gonna-
I said just a short answer. because
Yeah,
Yep, we're gonna shove right along here.
We're gonna have some crybabies in the comment section now.
Well, yeah. So the cover art itself, like we've dabbled around it as much as possible. What about the game itself? What are your guys' earliest memories of this game?
So my earliest memory on this was my first Sonic game was Sonic 2, not Sonic 1. So I have a bit of a warp here, but I went over to my friend Matt's house growing up, and he had a Sega Genesis, which he was one of the two friends that I knew that had one. And he had that cart that had Sonic 1, Sonic 2, and Mean Bean Machine on it. So I'm over at his house, we're playing in his pool, and I get out of the pool and I come in, dry off, see if I can play on a Sega. And I put in that cart, and I could select the Sonic game that I've played at another friend's house, Sonic 2, but then I'm like, okay, well, I'll try Sonic 1. I've never played it before. My earliest memories of this are loving Green Hill Zone, accidentally going through getting into the special stage. When you finish Green Hill, you can get the special stage just by jumping at the end of the goalpost, and then just being assaulted with every single bit of visual stimuli that I think the Genesis could have thrown at me all at once, because there's a lot going on in those special stages.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that sticks out to me more than anything. I didn't get past Marble Garden Zone back then. I was far too bad at video games as a kid. I didn't get past Marble Garden Zone until I owned my own copy through the Mega Collection on the GameCube. But it was playing that game for the first time on his Genesis after having already played Sonic 2 several times before, and just kind of feeling, oh, I don't have the ability to use my spin dash. Like, feeling like I was playing a Sonic game that was lacking some essential things that I thought made a Sonic game, because I started on 2. And I didn't hate it. It just, I felt underpowered.
Yeah, dude, like there's nobody, like I started with Sonic 1 specifically, but even people that started on Sonic 1, I guarantee nobody went back to that game without accidentally attempting to do a spin dash.
It's that dash became so iconic, and there's several parts in that game where, like, so there'll be 4 badniks lined up. There'll be like the drill badniks that'll be underground, that'll pop up as soon as you get near them. And my first thought when I get to any of those areas is, well, I have no room behind me to gain momentum. I know they're going to pop up when I go forward. Sure would be good if I could spin dash through them right now. But that's,
and
that's
I'd
not
imagine,
a thing you
like,
got.
there's enough workarounds there. Like, I know they're probably thinking, like, obviously it's just a challenge, but like I'm also thinking of badniks of like a caterpillar and stuff like that, where you need to be super precise if you're going to try and jump on it, or you need to plan how you're going to build up that momentum and drive into the thing. And I respect the thinking behind that, if that was the intention. Like, look, once you jump, like, you're a death machine, really. Like, as soon as you roll up into a ball, there's not a lot that can hurt you if it doesn't have spikes. or can shoot you.
And that
You're
makes
gonna murder
sense.
the fuck out of most of everything.
There's
But yeah,
there's a lot of stuff playing through it again. There's a lot of stuff in there that like I hold issue with as game design choices, but I recognize that this is very much the mentality of the era. So, for instance, Sonic 1 has a lot of waiting in it. In Starlight Zone, there's a lot of waiting on rotating platforms. In Marble Garden Zone, there's a lot of waiting for the spike platforms to drop. Like, there's a lot of just...
Marble Zone, just before nerds start picking on you.
Fine. They can yell. I'm okay with them yelling. It's fine. We're talking
Everyone
about
makes those two up. Everybody.
And then I'll finish this one up so that Pup can talk a little bit more about his first experience on game stuff. But with the amount of waiting that's in that game, and as much issue as I hold with it, and as much issue as I hold with jump being the only thing that really takes care of so many of your problems unless you've already got built up momentum, when I think about the platformers around that time, waiting as a mechanic was actually not that uncommon. When I look back at a lot of the Bowser castles in Mario 3, there's a lot of times where you're like on a skull bridge over lava and you're just having to wait on the bridge as it mechanically moves, or there's auto scroll sections where you're having to wait for the camera to pan. So like, I don't like those things, but they were so prevalent back then that I can't even really blame Sonic 1 for doing them.
Yeah, I think that's like my main critique against people that really complain about that game is it is hard to go back and not look at it specifically, as weird as this sounds, as a Sonic game, but you have to play it like any other platformer. Basically, it's Sonic 1 was kind of dipping its toes into brand new territory, but also using the trappings of what had come before just to ensure that they were making like a solid enough game. Like, you could probably take Mario through a lot of the levels in Sonic, but those ramps and the way you attack enemies, that does make a difference. So like, there's enough there that does differentiate that original game, but it has so much of what made platformers that you still have to kind of go into it as its own unique game from the rest of the series going forward.
And then Pup,
so yeah,
let's hear a little bit about your first experiences here.
Okay, so you gotta take into account this was not only my first experience with Sonic 1, my first experience with Sonic, it was my first experience with a game, full stop. Now, if I'm to talk exactly about the first experience, my memory's a little spotty, because I would have been about 3 years old. What probably happened is some adult probably plonked a Mega Drive controller in my hands. I'd shit my diaper and go to sleep. I don't know. But my memory is that was the first game I ever played. Now, of course, I did get a bit more into it as time went by. I can't pinpoint exactly when. But the way I saw it, Green Hill Zone was Sonic 1, and the rest was optional. This was... This was like kind of my first time experiencing everything that video games had to offer. I was fascinated by cheat codes at a very early age. And I remember the process being, I played through Green Hill Zone Act 1, 2, and 3, thought this is substantial, this is fun, Dr. Robotnik's hella scary, and I got that done. Once I got to Marble Zone, I didn't even need to get underground before I decided I'd had enough. It's a more miserable looking level compared to Green Hill Zone. Like, Green Hill's got very peppy music, and it's all blue skies and stuff. Marble Zone's a bit cloudier, even down to its music, and I guess a lot of this can be attributed to the PAL version of the game, where you
it's a cemetery, dude. Yeah.
Yeah, Marble Zone comparatively is a fucking cemetery. So, like, I was more fascinated by, okay, how could I fuck with the game? How could I play around with cheat codes and stuff? And I was like, I wonder what the last level is like. And like, so God. I did the up, down, left, right cheat code after like asking my sister what the cheat codes were. And then I had to ask, what does final mean? And obviously that means lasts. Like, I was like, okay, final zone. I was like, oh, okay, that's surprisingly doable. Like, considering I haven't played any of the other levels, like defeating the piston boss was actually pretty easy. And then I just kind of explored the rest of the game in a very non-linear order before, like, reaching my near 10 years old, deciding, you know what, let's play it properly. Let's play it in sequence. I don't think I ever actually completed it properly though, until after I'd gotten back into the Sonic series with Sonic Unleashed in 2009, I want to say. Where I had a newfound fascination for Sonic games beyond just puttering around in that first level or so. So, yeah, but in retrospect, I do think people tend to kind of give Sonic 1 quite a hard time on the basis that it's kind of, it plays like a standardized platformer for most of the game, with the exception of that first level where you really see what Sonic can do. But I have to say, I don't think it's entirely fair to hold that against Sonic 1, because in actuality, Sonic 1 is still a really good game. It's perfectly functional. You can still play it today and think, yeah, this isn't janky. It doesn't feel too dated. Obviously, it's a retro game, but it feels like that's on its side. The thing is just that it improved in Sonic 2 so much to the point where the level design really utilized Sonic. But that's not something I hold against Sonic 1, and I don't think it is fair to reduce Sonic 1 simply because its sequels did it better. That's how it's supposed to be.
Good problem for a franchise to have.
Yeah, if your first outing is the worst of your trilogy, that's how it should be. Like,
and it's actually kind of funny when you compare that to say how Mario was operating at the time. Mario 2 was something that we wouldn't get to experience in the States until several years after it came out, because I'll be quite frank, Japanese Mario 2 sucks. For anybody who's a fan of Mario Lost Levels, I'm sorry, that game is just made to punish you. I do not like it.
It's just interesting to me, because...
But I mean... Go ahead, Pup, sorry. I mean, just like, all this, I'll just say real quick, like, when it comes to Mario 2, even when it comes to Sonic, like, I think people need to understand, like, it's easy to look back on all this, but, like, everything was experimental. And, yeah, I mean, that's why I don't give too much shit from Mario 2, because Miyamoto wasn't running a second game. He's got more of his hands in Doki Doki Panic, which is why I'm fine with the American Mario 2 being what it is.
Yeah.
There's just a lot of experimenting. People didn't have even the idea of, like, okay, let's take this format and improve upon it. Like, that wasn't, like, the immediate obvious thing to do.
Yeah, because if you look at, like, Zelda 1 and 2 at the time, they did a complete format shift for that.
Yeah.
So
that's just games just being games, just trying to figure out what the hell they're doing.
So seeing Sonic 2 essentially doing what the video game market would be doing going forward, which is taking when it's doing it well, taking the formula of Sonic 1 and then just, for lack of the pun, running with it, and then just doing everything that it did well, but better, and then taking a lot of the shortcomings from the first game and then just doing away with them. Yeah. That was kind of a rarity back then, but it's fairly normal now.
There's something where I was kind of gonna launch pad off of one of Nick's earlier points at the start of this. There's, I think a lot of those people that are kind of doing baby's first video game review and saying, Sonic 1 is bad, or Sonic 1 is bad in retrospect, I think channel the energy you're putting into slamming Sonic 1 into praising Sonic 2, because, like, that's everything a sequel should be. Like,
oh yeah,
and Sonic 1 is not guilty of that. Like, I think it is a valid criticism to level up the game to say, if your main character's main thing is speed built up through momentum, it makes sense to have level design that encourages that a lot more. Yeah, that's a valid criticism. But, like, when you're basically just saying the whole game is shit because, like, Sonic 2 renders it superfluous, no, at worst, you've got a bit of video game history here. At best, you've got something that still holds up today, I would say.
There are some design things in Sonic 1 that I think weren't necessarily great when they came out, but most of that, having played through it again, I think most of my issues kind of fall down to Labyrinth Zone, and not necessarily that Labyrinth Zone is bad on its face, just in design. Hey, you can have an underwater level game in Sonic and it works perfectly okay. But playing through that again, I think the fact that we had to experience Labyrinth Zone essentially 4 separate times in that game, that was a little much. Because if you've never played Sonic 1, you have Labyrinth Zone, Act 1, 2, and 3, and then at the end of all of that, you do Scrap Brain Zone, Act 1 and 2, and then Eggman knocks you down, and you have to basically do a Scrap Brain Zone Act 4 as your or Labyrinth Zone Act 4 basically as your final Scrap Brain Zone level. It's like, wait, why do I have to do this again?
So I think while Labyrinth Zone is easily the most difficult game level in the game, I would still say it's not my least favorite level.
I just think it's unenjoyable.
I don't know, because like I find it varies for me. If I'm not streaming it and no one is watching, I can breeze through Labyrinth Zone. But the second someone's watching me, it suddenly becomes as hard as everyone says it is. It's really strange. It's
I noticed that too when I was streaming it. That's really weird.
It's like I feel like you need to be in the right mood to get it right. In which case, very cleverly designed level that definitely lives up to its name. It's infamous for how challenging it is, and it feels like the kind of thing that I guess should come later in the game or something. I don't know, because the thing with
It's the second
Zone,
to last level, though. I mean, it's later in the game.
it's not.
Or
it's
no,
not.
no,
It's not
you're
the
right.
second to last level.
Starlight's after it.
Yeah,
You're right.
Starlight's
Yeah.
sandwiched between. I feel like, and the thing is, I think it does go on a bit long as well. I feel like if it's just like you have the first and second acts, like you've still got a really good, challenging level. That's kind of its whole thing. Its whole shtick is how challenging it is. And like, yeah, it might not deliver everything you want from Sonic's first outing, but it's still a really well-designed, trap-filled level that is really punishing, but in a good way. I kind of view Labyrinth Zone in a similar way to how I view Eggman Land. I guess the difference is, with Eggman Land, you've still got the Sonic thrills of going fast, whereas Labyrinth Zone, it's a slog.
That's kind of my problem with Labyrinth. Is that, like, I'm okay with the traps. I'm okay with the spike balls everywhere. I'm okay with the spears popping out of the walls. Like, all of that stuff making me feel like I've got to be really careful as I move. That's fine. What I don't like is the sheer amount of water in that level. Because you can, when you're going through that level, you don't have a choice but to be in the water. It's like there's almost only 1 or 2 pathways. They're all underwater. They're all almost identical. And it just feels really, really sluggish. And as much as I had issues with Starlight Zone with all of the bottomless pits in it, I at least enjoyed myself running around in it more than I did in Labyrinth.
So what I would say is, I enjoy Labyrinth and appreciate Labyrinth from the perspective that it is a gauntlet of a level. Like, you feel really good once you've beaten it. And as I say, there's some great design stuff in there, and there's a lot working against Sonic, and it is just fun to see how much can go against Sonic and how much you can overcome. That's what I kind of like about Labyrinth. The one that I would say, the level in Sonic 1 where if someone said you can pull that one out, and I'd say that's got to go, is Marble Zone. It's just a miserable level in my opinion. Like, it doesn't even have that gauntlet factor going for it. It's just a lot of waiting on blocks. The music, I like it, but on the PAL version, it sounds even more like a fucking funeral home. And like, it's just not fun. And it's the second level in. We've just had our fun little party in Green Hill, and now we you know, it would work if it had like a discovery aspect to it. If they had more things like giant Indiana Jones balls rolling at you and stuff like that. If there was more like, it's the secret underground temple, like that would work well. It's the kind of concept they could probably pull off in a game like Sonic 3 a lot better. But here, it's just a dull, horrid little slog of a level that immediately just stamps on your fun. I feel like if you took Sonic 1 and changed it so that it goes Green Hill Zone, no Marble Zone whatsoever, just straight into Spring Yard Zone, then Starlight Zone, then Labyrinth, and then Scrap Brain, it would be a much better game overall if you reordered it that way.
I think Labyrinth into Scrap Brain just makes more sense anyway, because, like I said before, the last level of the last act of Scrap Brain.
Okay. All right. I've let you boys go on for a minute. I'm going to jump in now. So I do have a couple things to say about the different levels. We are kind of jumping all over the place with those. Pup, I would disagree only in the sense that I do like the idea, and I think like if you look at this game, you can kind of see where like they had like new ideas in terms of video game. It just didn't know when to quit. Um, and I get that with Labyrinth quite a bit, where they're like, "Wow, we have a really cool idea for water. Listen to this drowning theme. Like, how scary is that? Like, how cool would that be as a gimmick for this game?" But then they just didn't know when to, stop dunking your head into that toilet of a level. Um, I do respect it, but I do think it overstays its welcome, and yeah, it does kind of drag down the speed element. And I think you're going to see a lot of that in Sonic 1, where it's like, here's a good idea, it needs refinement, and that's what we got Sonic 2 and 3 for. But I don't think I'd reorder the game, if I'm honest with you. I I do think like if you put Labyrinth in there and then Scrap Brain and then they put that final little dunk in the water there at the end, I think that might be a little bit too much. Like I get escalation in terms of challenge when it comes to video games. And I do think that is important. I do think the game needs to continue to throw new ideas at you and challenge your skills, but I don't know if Labyrinth does that.
I
I think
guess you need a
Labyrinth,
breather, don't you? Like between
yeah,
Labyrinth and Scrap Brain, you need that Starlight Zone to say, "Hey, the game is still fun." Otherwise, you're just going to be waterboarded for the entire second half of the game.
oh God. And just to jump on Marble, um, I do think we had it done better, but it's still like one of the most hated levels in the game it's in, and I think that would be Act 2 of Sandopolis. Because, like I said, I assume where I always took the marble to mean. I mean, it is marble. It could be like Greek stuff in the background. Maybe that's what's referring to. But I always kind of took it to mean like a mausoleum because you're going underground. There's this really dour music, and I always wanted more like of a haunted theme to it. I don't hate
Yeah.
all the set pieces in it, but yeah, like I can tell you as a kid too, like um I remember Green Hill and I remember Marble more than the rest of the game, and that's probably because I stopped some time in Marble. Most of the times I played that game. I like the aesthetic, but I also understand, yeah, the frustration you and others have with it because it is a tedious level, especially after Green Hill.
I just find it to be so miserable in pretty much every conceivable way. But like, I think a game that definitely proved that Marble Zone as a concept can work. And I know that we're kind of dipping into the future here, but Sonic Dimensions in the Leg Dimensions bundle has Marble Zone in it, and it kind of fills it. It kind of makes more use of those traps, but it gives you a bit more room to play around in. And it goes to show, like you could have like a trap-laden underground temple, or a mausoleum, whatever that means, and you could just have Sonic run around in there. Like the most fun part of Marble Zone for me is that brief moment where the lava comes at you, and you just got to quickly run through this very narrow pathway. But the thing is, like, it's so tight. Like, it's I don't know. It's just too tight.
It's just
So,
too
real
tight.
quick, do you not know what a mausoleum is?
I probably do. I'm just like very distracted by the pain I have in my wisdom tooth right now. But let's check it out.
So you know in cemeteries how they have the big concrete houses, marble houses
Oh
or
yeah,
whatever?
no, I know what you mean.
Yeah, that's a
Yeah,
mausoleum.
yeah, that's yeah.
Yeah. So I mean that's the impression I got from
I mean,
that
yeah,
level.
there's clearly a lot of mausoleum-esque design elements in there, like through the pillars, and there looks to be that temple with what people say is the Mario faces on it as well. It's
Yeah, it could be Greek statues or like Greek ruin, something like that. But yeah, I always assumed there was like a little bit of a haunted, to me, kind of a feel to it.
We'll say
yeah,
there's
even down to the music in Labyrinth Zone, it's more
Yeah.
jolly than the Marble Zone, and it really sounds like I'm shitting on the music. I've heard some fantastic remixes of that, like T. Lopes's cover of Marble Zone makes it sound active and exciting, and it's like, yeah, now I would be game for Marble Zone to make a return. But like in its form, especially in 50 hertz, where it's even slower, Nah, that's the ultimate party pooper stage, man. I had so much fun in slow Green Hill Zone. You just ruined it with even slower Marble Zone.
Let's say that there is a thing that I like about Marble Zone aesthetically that I hadn't really considered until playing through the game again today. And that's that when you go through Green Hill, that level is almost all natural landscapes. It feels very organic when you move through. And when you go through Marble Zone, it feels very organic until you get to the underground. And then you've got like these glass pillars moving around, which when you get there, this feels like this is the first sign of Eggman like industrializing the area. Like this is the first point where he's like encroaching on nature, which is kind of the theme as you go forward through that game anyway. But I like that that's the first time you see that as you go from these green landscapes, not as vibrant as the ones in Green Hill, but as soon as you go underground, you start seeing, oh, something's here that wasn't supposed to be here before. Because like the spikes, those look like they were meant to be there. Those look normal, but the glass pistons, I have a feeling those weren't in the original design.
I mean, I don't know if I'd really say that's industrialization, though. I mean, those look like ruins.
With the
I
glass,
guess it's
with the
that kind
glass
of,
pillars, though?
No,
I
it's
mean,
that
you're
kind
just
of
focusing on
progression.
one little thing in that whole thing. I mean, what about like the goalposts or the monitors throughout the game?
I think it's so much that it's like Robotnik's industrialization. I think it's more just as the game goes on, you start to see more and more man-made structures, I guess. But then again, like it's in a weird order again because like
Yeah.
Labyrinth Zone. I mean, I believe Labyrinth Zone, if I'm not mistaken, was supposed to be the second level originally, but they just knew no one would get past that. But like Labyrinth Zone is not as man-made looking as say Spring Yard.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. It's interesting.
Well, I think the games, at least, I mean, I think they have the bookend correct, if nothing else. You start off in a natural environment. I don't really know if I would agree in terms of the progression for pretty much any of the games. I mean, especially Angel Island, where it's I mean, it's all Knuckles' home, really. But it's always starts off more like what represents Sonic, which is the lush and the green and the freedom, and always ends with the constricting, deadly, robotic, industrial Eggman section at the end of the game. So the book ending has at least always been consistent.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's definitely more bookending, especially when you factor in like Sonic 2, for example, because the second
Oh,
level
yeah.
is Chemical Plant, but then after that you got things like Mystic Cave and stuff like that. I think
Yeah.
with Sonic 1, it is, I guess, a fair thing to say it does get, in some ways, progressively more man-made, because it's like Green Hill Zone is, it's the natural landscape. Marble Zone is natural, but there's a lot of stony stuff in there that has to be some form of man-made structure. Then you got Spring Yard, which is very man-made because like a city and stuff. And then Labyrinth is kind of the odd one out, but that was intended to be the second level. Starlight is obviously some form of city man-made, and then Scrap Brain Zone is a complete industrial wasteland. So I guess you could say, like, with Labyrinth being the odd one out, it does get progressively more man-made, but I don't necessarily think that's an indication of Dr. Robotnik or Ruin or anything negative until it becomes that at the end of the game.
I mean, that's fair.
I mean, we're talking about all the levels that people continuously talk about when it comes to this. We strangely have not talked a lot about Green Hill, but I feel like everyone's talked about Green Hill
I
to
feel like
the
Green
point
Hill
of
is
death.
like our reference point. Like I feel like if we were to go from here, if we were to go from Marble Zone, we'd just be talking about in reference to Green Hill. Like Green Hill is basically the quintessential Sonic stage because it just allows the player the chance to use every one of Sonic's skills. And it's a really fun, it's kind of everything a Sonic level should be. So when we go on to talk about things like Marble Zone, we can say, look, here's where it didn't fulfill Green Hill Zone's promise, I guess.
Green Hill
because
Zone
I
promised me things.
I feel like that's what it is, though. Green Hill Zone is a promise of what this character will be doing. And then it all grinds to a halt with Marble Zone. So I suppose if we were to move on to Spring Yard, I think that, like, I don't like using the term underappreciated because I feel like it implies that people are wrong for not feeling so strongly about it. But I really like Springyard Zone. It's got a lot of hills to it and a lot of ways Sonic can get about. The moving blocks is obviously not something I'm fond of, but other than that, I think Springyard is a really cool level.
I'll be right back. I'm going to let my tortoise out. He is straight up ramming stuff, so I'm going to let him out into the yard real quick.
That's fair.
Sure thing. Hey, Sirius, want to fight?
Yeah, let's fucking go. All right. So, Sonic Unleashed sucks. Let's go.
It's not worth fighting because I know you don't mean that.
Yeah, I know. I don't. I love Unleashed. I can't do that. I will say this though, as much as I hate the moving blocks in Springyard, the thing that the thing that I dislike about Springyard the most isn't that, because again, with the moving blocks, the waiting and the excruciating time that you're having to sit there and wait for them to slowly scale you up an area, that was just kind of game design in 1991. That's just kind of what they did. So
it's one of those things that suffered more retrospectively.
Yeah, like it was perfectly acceptable when it came out. It wasn't. It was more agitating later. The thing that I noticed most about Springyard playing through it again, though, it wasn't the waiting, because again, I can put myself back into the playing it as a kid and going, nah, this is what I would have expected from a game back then. What bugged me about Springyard is the amount of repeated set pieces. It feels like there's maybe 4 major set pieces in Springyard that are just repeated ad nauseum in different orders for Act 1, 2, and 3. There's the moving blocks. Then there's these little corridors where there's a spike moving with rings above it, and there's always some variation on that. Then there's a downhill slope with 2 spike balls that will move at different intervals to one another. Then there's one more, but I can't remember what it is. But like the amount of times that those set pieces just repeated over and over again through Springyard. Oh, the other one that repeats itself. Long flat hallway, and then at the end there's a single little area that Sonic can slip through to go down, but there's a bumper at the end so that you have to approach it slowly. And that happens maybe 4 or 5 times from Act 2 onward. And just the amount of repeating of those things it makes that level feel much longer than it is between Act 1, 2, and 3, because I feel like I'm not seeing anything new as I go through that level. I feel like I'm just seeing those same 4 things on repeat. And that's my biggest gripe with that level, is that.
I guess that's all fair and valid. I think I think it kind of falls in line with kind of my feelings towards the game having 3 acts per stage as well. Like, it's a lot of these stages do not justify having a 3 act. And again, that's one of those things that Sonic 2 really fixed, was how we had 2 acts instead of 3. And I guess my biggest criticism towards Springyard is just that it doesn't have enough there to justify being a 3-act long stage. However, like, things like where you say, like, there's the bit where there's the long stretch of hill and the 2 spike balls that are alternating. Like, I like that bit because it does test your reaction time with Sonic. And I feel like that's a more organic kind of trap for Sonic to be up against than,
I
say,
agree.
what we had in Marble and Labyrinth.
I agree with that assessment. My issue isn't that it exists. Like, all the things that I mentioned are not things that I hold issue with in a vacuum. My problem came down to, as I was playing through the level literally like 3 hours ago, it felt like I was encountering those exact 4 things on repeat. I feel like if it had been 2 acts, I might not have had that issue at all, because, like you said...
That's the main thing. I feel like a lot of these would have just benefited from just being 2 acts. Also, just a side note, we got the very first, very early iteration of Metal Sonic in this level.
That always confused me as a kid. I distinctly, I can tell you for sure, and this is something I think we should address about Sonic 1, is the turnaround between Sonic 1 and 2 is like a literal year between these 2 games.
Yep.
So it really only had that 1 year to stand on its own, and I don't think a good majority of people now, we really can't divorce those 2 sets of memories. But I can distinctly tell you, I remember I did play Green Hill before I played through Sonic 2. But whenever I finally got my own Genesis, it was probably a pack-in with Sonic 1 and 2. And I was not skilled enough as a child to get past Marble Zone, but I was skilled enough to get through at least a good half of Sonic 2. So by the time I got to Spring Yard, I can distinctly remember the first time in my little life feeling like, and I don't know if I had the exact words for it back then as a child, but I was definitely like, oh, this is definitely like a proto Casino Night. Like, this feels like an unfinished Casino Night.
Oh
Yeah.
yes, definitely.
Like that was
that's
like one of the
Yeah.
first times I was like the theme, like the aesthetic of the level doesn't quite match up with like the music I'm hearing. Like, I can see some little bits of like neon light, but like this purpley maroon tinge to everything. Like I said it in that very first video, it doesn't feel like Las Vegas. It feels like Lake Tahoe to me as far as the casino's concerned. Like it's just some weird casino that you find out in the mountains or something like that that has nothing to do with the strip.
So
Yeah,
what you're
like,
saying
I feel
is,
like go on.
I was just gonna say that. So what you're saying is, this is the casino night we have at home.
I feel like the contrast between Spring Yard and Casino Night is like the clearest indication of like the difference in confidence between these two games. Like Sonic 1 is just slightly more subtle, it's a bit more muted, the music's more calm. Moving into Sonic 2, it's suddenly got this brash sense of cockiness to it.
It's a fucking
And-
celebratory level in Sonic 2, it feels like.
Yeah, like it's joyous. It feels like you're at like this big Vegas event and stuff. Like I think that's kind of like Sonic's cockiness definitely shines through in Sonic 1, but the game, Sonic as an entity, as an IP, didn't become so cocky and confident until that second go.
There is one
Yeah,
thing in Spring Yard. I just want to mention this one thing, Nick. It didn't occur to me until today that the lettering in Spring Yard spells out cope.
Oh yeah,
I didn't even notice it until today. I'm just like,
I've always found that so funny.
I was like, oh my god,
That's great.
I feel so weird now.
Yeah, I mean, looking back on it, and again, like this is a problem of playing through Sonic 2 before you go back to 1. Like, you'll notice a lot of stuff like that, and I didn't really even think about, yeah, you're right, like there's just like a few traps or like set pieces that just kind of repeat themselves, but they don't ever like escalate and challenge. They just kind of keep happening. And like I think about like that pit that just has a bunch of bumpers and then some springs like right above it. Like, I even remember as a kid, I was like, what the hell is the point of this? This feels so sloppy compared to everything else so far. And again, it's fine, but I definitely feel Spring Yard felt very unfinished, especially when you had the sequel right there.
Yeah, there's not a lot of time between the two. And then you've got, people who didn't own a Sega like me experiencing Sonic 2 for the first time. So when you go back and actually play that level, it's just... Green Hill feels fine. Green Hill doesn't feel like a proto-Emerald Hill. It just feels like another good first level. Spring Yard, it really has that prototype feel everywhere.
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the reasons why people don't talk about it a whole lot anymore, is because like it really does feel like, well, why would we talk about this when we have Casino Night? Like, that was the aesthetic going forward. That was the basis for any casino-based Sonic level. And if we had stuck with Spring Yard, that aesthetic might not have stuck around. But we do have to appreciate the bumper springs and everything else that it brought to the table.
I think another thing worth noting was, like, I think something that made Spring Yard Zone quite enticing for me as a child, and this is gonna be quite some trivia here, but the level reminded me of chocolate. Let me explain why.
Okay.
So, in the UK, perhaps the most well-known chocolate is Cadbury's Dairy Milk, which comes in these purple wrappers, and you've got the purple of the sky, not to mention there's very sort of 3D blocky textures to most of the architecture that is like a glossy chocolatey brown looking color. And that very much kind of looks like the little blocks that you would get in like a Cadbury Dairy Milk bar. But then there are certain indoor parts where it's got this almost bubble-like texture, which reminded me of Aero bars, and it's just like, I don't know, the whole thing just reminds me of chocolate. And as a kid, obviously, like, one of the best things in the world is fucking chocolate. So it's just like, I kind of thought of that as the chocolate factory zone in a way. And I kind of feel like, you could kind of just mod that zone to be a chocolate factory, and it would probably have more of its own merit if you did that.
Sonic,
You
I
know,
found a golden
that's-
ticket.
I don't hate any of that.
Yeah.
That's actually like I can see the association, and I would absolutely love a Chocolate Factory Sonic level. I know we've had candy stuff. I mean, Sonic Colors, but yeah,
It's just the
honestly,
colors, and it matches the branding. Like especially like the main architecture blocks, they've got a very similar shade of kind of a brownish bronzy color to
Yeah.
the wrappers that we have on Galaxy bars, which over in America are called Dove bars, I believe.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
So,
I
the
looked kind of like
and I
imprint
just
look.
think, yeah. So I kind of looked at that and just thought chocolate, and I think that's just something that made me really love that stage as a kid.
You know,
So yeah, that's just a bit of
Hmm.
subliminal trivia right there.
a chocolate level in Sonic wouldn't be bad if you actually merged. If you actually like try to functionally add chocolate in as a mechanic. So like, for instance, there could be areas where you have to go down a chocolate slide, not unlike the water slides in Labyrinth Zone. But when you're going down that slide, you're also getting covered in chocolate that you have to then spin dash off of you, else you're handicapped by it. Like it could be done.
I feel like
I'd take that
every
in
time-
Sonic Mania too. Like if they ever brought Spring Yard back, like I would love if they wanted to expand upon it in that kind of fun way, kind of like they did with some of the older levels. I wouldn't hate that. Like you brought in some like nice little elements that kind of was a nod to Sonic Colors or something like that. That'd be a perfect fusion.
I feel like also this would just be an opportunity for a bit of sprite animation. Every time you go to to like a breakable wall, rather than having to spin dash, you can just walk through it, but you see Sonic just chomping away at it.
Well, I gotta admit, pup, I got a new appreciation for Spring Yard.
And
Crazy.
now-
I thought that was the weirdest point in the world, but like I'm glad it's kind of become like a talking topic.
it's actually not bad. And even like some of the repeated architecture in that level, how often we see it again. And now I know it's just because I keep going to the same candy aisle.
You guys have aero bars over in America as well.
Wait, what?
No, but we have enough. Like we have enough like spots. It depends on where you are in the country and where you're shopping.
because
There's
it's
enough import
basically-
stuff. I know what that is. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so because that's what I mean by the bubbly texture on the indoor parts of the level. Reminiscent of kind of that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I've had it before. It's a very weird experience. Like it doesn't actually taste any different. It's just they put air bubbles in there, so the texture's different.
It's been years since I've had that kind of chocolate. I had a Cadbury bar like a year ago, but I haven't had an. I don't know if it was an Aero bar specifically or if it was a knockoff one that just had the air bubbles in it. But it was. I do remember it being one of those things where like I expected it to be more different than it was,
Mm-hmm.
but it was still different enough for me to know that I was eating something other than a standard candy bar.
I think if I'm not mistaken, Cadbury's in America is quite different to Cadbury's in England, because I think the American one still adds that butyric acid to it that European and English chocolate doesn't have. It's the acid that makes it taste like vomit.
Well, I mean, the Cadbury eggs potentially. Like most supermarkets over here now have like a whole section for like European chocolates. Like almost literally
you
all of
need
them
it.
now.
You need it because American chocolate tastes like shit.
Yeah, we actually.
It's hideous to us. Like we can't stand it.
I forget what there's.
Well, I mean, I think that's just Hershey's though. Like you know what a Hershey's thing tastes like, and yeah, it's not for everybody. But like same with McDonald's, like you don't go there for a quality burger, but you're going there for the McDonald's flavor.
Well,
like
the
you
thing
know
I
what
could
that
kind
tastes
of-
like.
The thing I could kind of say about McDonald's is, well, you don't go there for like a quality burger. It doesn't actively taste like vomit. That's like the thing. And I know people are going to argue and say it is subjective, but the reason we associate with vomit is because that butyric acid is found in vomit. We don't really put that in food over here, so like it's the only reference point we have for that taste.
I mean,
Sure.
that's fair.
But I digress. Shall we talk about Shall we skip Labyrinth? Because I feel like we've talked about that.
We
already.
talked about enough. Yeah, we're getting a little bit too Wreck-It Ralph here. We're starting off with the video games, ending up in Candyland.
So I guess that just leaves we have Scrap Brain and we have Starlight to go over.
But I want to hear your thoughts on Starlight. Even in my first video, I was very dismissive of that level, but I've come to learn that's a favorite for a lot of people. So I'm curious to hear what you guys think of it.
So my experience with Starlight, bear in mind, first of all, my experience with Starlight today was my first experience with Starlight Zone. I had not until today actually properly beaten, outside of using a level select, Sonic 1. It was me going, okay, I want to prep for us to have this discussion that I actually played through, and I actually beat the game in an hour. It's weird how that works. So my impression of Starlight was I loved a lot of the mechanics that it introduced. I loved the fans basically blocking your way in certain areas. I loved having to interact with the environment to actually get it to kind of cooperate with you. So there's areas where there's a platform above you and you can't quite reach it, but you've got to kind of knock yourself into it to get it to fall down so that you can actually climb up it as a staircase. I like stuff like that. Interacting with the environment, great. Here's what I hated about it. Everything else. I cannot stand bottomless pits if they can be avoided. I want my mistakes to not be because I felt like I was going too fast in the Sonic game and now I've missed my platform and now I'm dead repeatedly. I also feel like bottomless pits in a continue lives based game where the continues can only be gotten from special zones, really not a huge fan. I loved all of the ideas in Spring Yard Zone, but the actual execution in that zone was just me falling off platforms a whole hell of a lot and just really not enjoying my time in it as a result. When there was nothing under me except for metal, then I felt fine, because now I'm able to kind of interact with what this level's trying to make me do, and I can have fun with it. And then every time that I go to one of those here's the next area that has the rotating windmill platforms, I'm like, oh cool, now I can just miss my jump and die again. Excellent.
That's very strange hearing that from a Sonic Adventure 2 fan.
I feel kind of similar, to be honest. I feel obviously Starlight Zone is very popular, and I think a lot of that comes down to, for example, Labyrinth, Marble Zone. All that's come before has had us being like, Father Sega, can I please have some slopes, please? And
may I have some
Starlight
speed?
Zone. Starlight Zone delivers on that, but as you say, there is a huge over-reliance on bottomless pits, especially when you get to things like the little seesaws. There are so many points where those little seesaws that you have to spring off of are your only platform, and Sonic instinctively wants to go down them. And it's like an uphill battle just to not die. It would have been so much better if they just put a spike pit down there or something. It doesn't need to be a bottomless pit, but then again, spike pits in Sonic 1 were about as good as a bottomless pit anyway, so I guess...
Yeah.
Just except something else down there.
Except for the one random spike pit I found in Labyrinth Zone that I posted about on Twitter, where I found myself sandwiched between spikes and not actually taking any damage.
There you go.
And I was just like, well, I guess I can just jump out now. Okay.
So, yeah, Starlight Zone does at least deliver some of what Sonic's USP is a little better than a lot of the other levels. However, I definitely wouldn't put it up there with Green Hill Zone, or even Chocolate Yard Zone, to be honest.
I'll be honest,
so,
I think I would say that as many problems as I have with that level, I would say that when it's doing what it's doing well, I enjoy it about as much as Green Hill. But when it's got bottomless pits everywhere, I enjoy it about as much as Marvel.
So I just want to say the theming on this one is, again, it's one of those very basically themed one. It's basically just, the theming is, it's nighttime.
It's nighttime and there's scaffolding.
Yeah.
It feels like a construction yard.
Yeah, exactly. It's a clear piece of evidence that, Sonic went on to much bigger and more confident things as soon as Sonic 2 came around.
And this is like the one spot I feel like the soundtrack really nails the feeling of these places, especially when you know that the music was based off of screenshots. But I feel like this is the one spot in the game where that kind of backfires. I feel like, oh, we must got a screenshot of the night starry sky, and we based it off of that, and not the rest of the level aesthetic, because I don't think that music fits at all when you get to the lower paths and stuff like that. It's beautiful, but I don't think it truly fits.
It doesn't make me feel like I'm in a construction yard, but the level makes me feel like I'm in a construction yard.
The thing is, when I see that, I don't like see beautiful night sky. If I were to play through that level without the sound on at all, I wouldn't even imagine there being music. I would just it's that vacant. I would just imagine the sound of wind blowing through like a few buildings, and maybe you'd hear someone coughing in the distance, and maybe some drug deal going on behind some back alley somewhere. That's the sound I would imagine.
When it comes to construction based stuff, I have always thought that level was like just so weird in terms of aesthetic. The general challenges I'm kind of whatever about, because I mean at that point in the game you've been through so much in terms of what they're expecting you to do. Like the more careful platforming, I'm okay with. It's not perfect by any means, but it's whatever at that point in the game for me. But like when I think of construction, you think it'd be like during the day, like this is like a blue collar job. You expect things to have moving parts, you expect it to be busy, you expect something like Wacky Workshop out of Sonic CD, where that feels lively and it feels like there's stuff going on here. And it feels like everyone's gone home for the night and Sonic's just scampering through.
It feels like it's like midnight or something. Like,
yeah. And that'd be fine. I mean, I guess he's a rodent. He'd be scavenging for scraps. So he's not technically a rodent, I know. But,
he's scavenging
they are nocturnal creatures.
Brain.
He's scavenging for honey rings.
So, I don't know if we really have anything else to say about Starlight, but what do you guys think about Scrap Brain? Because I remember very vehemently saying, not saying it, but fuck that level when I was a kid.
It feels like a final level. I think I actually like Act 1 and 2. I actually really do like Act 1 and 2 of Scrap Brain. It feels adequately punishing. The only things that I don't like about it, I hate those red platforms. The ones that like snap open and shut.
Yeah.
I hate those things.
I kind of thought it got excessive. Like there's fire shooting at you, and also there's electricity and also pits. Like I thought it was a little excessive, personally.
So the electricity I actually like, because where it is, it's almost always at the very bottom of areas, and they're always spaced out in a way that you can kind of sandwich yourself in between them without getting hurt. It feels like, welcome to the bottom, it's claustrophobic, get up, get out. And for a final level, that's fine.
Yeah, I was about to say, I find, honestly, Scrap Brain to be significantly more forgiving than Labyrinth, Starlight, and Marble Zone, like, on a whole. Like, that's not to say it's not as challenging, but it's definitely more forgiving. Like, when you drop down to those pits, you've still got some time before the electricity comes, and, like, I don't know, I feel like everything's very well telegraphed in that one. The main thing I don't like is where you've got those conveyor belts with the spinny platforms, and for some reason...
Oh, and the chainsaws coming down?
Path, yeah, and if you're on the lower path, it can be really difficult to get on those spinny blocks.
Yeah, you've got to time it. It's weird.
Yeah, like, there are some bits that are just finicky in there. But on a whole, I actually think Scrap Brain Zone is a very well-designed, if maybe a little flat level. I think it could do with a bit more verticality to it. Then there's the end of Act 2, which I think is a really clever... a really clever little misdirect, where, like, you're approaching Dr. Robotnik and you get the first cutscene in a Sonic game, and it's the first time you hear that final boss variation of Robotnik's theme as well. And then he just drops you back down to Labyrinth Zone. They knew what they were doing there.
Oh, yeah.
And I think it's so clever. What I will say is, as much as I do struggle with Labyrinth Zone, I do think that fourth and final act has the mercy of being quite a bit shorter. And when you go on those springs and it launches you up to the final zone, it feels good. Like, it feels really good.
Oh yeah, I can agree with that. It feels it feels triumphant, like you're out of there. And maybe it's just because I finished Resident Evil 8 recently, and no spoilers for anybody, but that game has a fetish with knocking you down to the basement level of areas. So maybe it's just that I've just got through playing that game that I'm like, yeah, no, I love getting up to the top after being in the basement.
I also just love, though, like, this level is where we started to get a sense of that Sonic confidence, but also that Sonic sadism as well. It's just because, like, this game knew how to make you hate Dr. Robotnik. And if anything's going to make you hate this guy, it's him sending you back to Labyrinth Zone just when you're about to confront him. But then, like, I also just love how at the end of Act 3, it's not just 1 or 2 springs that launch you up. It's this whole bed of them. And it's just like any one of these springs could be the one to send you to the end. And they're bright red in this otherwise very grey and purple level. Like, you know you've made it once you see those. And it's on the home stretch now. Like...
So, yeah, I'm trying to think of like the last boss in general. I do think that was the one thing it might have a little bit over Sonic 2 would be the appropriate amount of challenge when they force you to fight a boss without rings. I thought they got a bit excessive with Mecha Sonic and then in the Death Egg robot, especially as a kid on a life-based, continue-based situation, because I can't tell you how many times I got forced back to the very beginning of the game again and how disheartening that is. And you're going to have that a lot in Sonic 1. A lot. But
especially when it's that much longer as well. Like,
yeah. So I think, I mean, it's definitely not quite the spectacle as they would be going forward in the games. But in terms of what the expectation of the player is and what they're handing you to, I don't know, what they're giving you to do, it's not the most interesting boss fight in the world, but I think it's appropriate enough. It's fairly safe, if somewhat lacking in terms of memorability.
I mean, I think it's a very simple boss. Like, it's honestly, I'd say it's a much easier boss than the one in, say, Spring Yard or other ones like that. Like, if you ask me to fight certain bosses without rings, like, this is the one to ask me to do it. Like, this one, you know...
Well, because, I mean, half the ways he'll kill you is by crushing you anyway, and rings be damned if that happens.
Yeah, like, that's the thing, though, is, like, for a boss you fight with no rings, it is perfectly reasonable on the difficulty standard, which is surprising, because Sonic 1 is an incredibly sadistic game, for the most part. And I kind of feel like, once you reach Final Zone, you even got that little music stinger at the beginning, before it gets into that boss theme, which just tells you, hey, it's the Final Zone. It has less of a, oh god, this is the end feeling to it, as so much as it does, we're on the home stretch now, baby. Let's just beat this guy up at last. Like, that's what I like about Final Zone. Like, it feels just like this is your chance to beat Robotnik up for everything he's put you through. Now let's move along.
There is one thing that we haven't actually talked about through this whole thing, except for 2 instances. We haven't really gotten into the way Robotnik was utilized as a boss in this game, because I feel like the idea of Robotnik having a hovercraft and using the hovercraft to fight you is played incredibly safe in Sonic 1 compared to the types of things that he does with the hovercraft later. Like, Sonic 1, he has a chain ball that he uses. He's got the spike that he uses in Spring Yard Zone for dislodging the platforms under you. He has Marble Zone. He has, like, little, like, drops the napalm on the ground type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then the only time that you fight him in a different kind of setting is here with the pistons. The modification,
even down to the fact that, like, in Labyrinth Zone, he's not even fighting you with an attachment or appendage. It's just him in his little Eggmobile.
Yeah, like, it's his hovercraft is played super straight and super safe in 1. And it was really weird to me, because I'm so used to now, after having over 20 years of Sonic the Hedgehog in my life, I'm so used to the hovercraft being like the thing powering some wacky device. Like, now it's part of a car, now it's part of a mecha, now it's part of literally the hundreds of things that we've seen him do with them. And in this game, he's just like, nah, I'm gonna shove a spike under it, guys. That's what I'm doing.
So Sonic 1 is the basic action figure. The series going forward is all the wacky accessories you attach to it.
Yeah, and it's I mean it still works. Like there's nothing wrong with it if you're looking at the game in isolation, then that design works. I just think it's so neat, I guess, that they took that base idea and they said, "Okay, look, so you know how we did things like put a little napalm canister on him or put a spike at the bottom? Okay, what if we put him in literally anything?" And what does that mean? No, we mean literally anything. Like think of a mechanical monstrosity of some kind. You can think of an Eggman mobile piloting it, and it will work.
I mean, in that now I'm wondering though, like Scrap Brain. I've always wondered what the hell the name of that meant, but like if you think about it, like in those pistons, I wonder if that kind of represents like, you know, the brain of his operations. Like he's part of the machine itself. So when you destroy it, you're destroying the engine of his operations, and you know you take it all down. Because obviously that's where the game ends anyway. So I'm wondering if that, you know, that one change over to a different machine is an indication, like, okay, like this is the big bad daddy that's causing all the actual environmental problems.
So the original name for Scrap Brain, when it was in prototype mode, was called Clockwork Zone. So I think the idea has always been like these are the mechanical things making everything move. Because
well, I mean, they'd have to throw that out anyway because it's not running on fucking on a watch battery or anything.
No, it's not. But when you think of clockwork, you think of multiple gears working in tandem to make everything else move. So I think that if that mentality is carried forward, then it would make sense that you're like, no, this is the brains of the operation. This is the thing. This is the central nervous system of what Robotnik is trying to accomplish.
Yeah.
I've always wanted to know what the Scrap Brain looks like from the outside as well. But it's also just like, as you mentioned, like the evolution of like how the Eggmobile is implemented. Yeah, when you like look at that little spike that he's got in Spring Yard, and then compare that to say Egg Dragoon, where like you can still see the Eggmobile is in there, but like holy crap, like.
But now he's a Gurren Lagann mech, yes.
There's a big evolution there, which I really like Sonic 1 as that basic point. Like, there's a lot of appeal to seeing Robotnik in his very early stages. And yeah, I kind of like the minimalism of some of these boss designs. But yeah, I think the final zone is more than fair as far as the challenge goes, and it's a good way to round off the game. And yeah.
I wouldn't mind, like, I know Death Egg's like the most like one of the most iconic things, and this is something I've always had a little bit of an issue with, because every one of these things, like, I learned about through Sonic first, so of course my heart's attached to this stuff. But like, you know, going out from there, learning like, oh no, Death Egg actually means Death Star, and you know, Super Sonic's actually, you know, from Super Saiyan, you know, this and that and the other. I kind of wish they would reuse at least the term Scrap Brain, because I feel like design wise you can make some really crazy shit out of that.
Not to mention,
I think though that we did actually get that in Sonic Forces. Like Eggman Empire Fortress, especially classic Sonic stage there, takes a lot of inspiration from Scrap Brain. And a part of me wonders if maybe they were going to call it that at some point, but people were upset about them reusing old stages, like, because most of the stages in that game are some form of adaptation of something else.
I don't know about that though, because like why would they like hold back there when the entirety of classic Sonic's in there?
I firmly believe that like Metropolis is Grand Metropolis to some extent, and I feel like, you know, they were like, okay, we got Death Egg, we got Green Hill, we got Chemical Plant, let's just rename all these other zones, maybe give them a slight reskin, because it is Eggman Empire Fortress, especially Mortar Canyon, or is which one? Iron Fortress rather, is the closest thing we've had to the Scrap Brain, in that it's an earthbound base. It's got those rotatey bits, it's full of traps, it's fucking unfair in places, and yeah, like, even down to little electric floors and everything. Like, literally, like, if you look at the level gimmicks in Iron Fortress, it is just Scrap Brain Zone.
Not to make this a Forces podcast again, but like you just kind of jumped on something that I just realized, like, here's a yet another great idea they could have had for Sonic Forces, which was be like, yeah, you got a point. Like, they did reuse Death Egg. Like, there's a lot of aesthetic in there that just because we hadn't seen it reused before, like we did with Green Hill so many times, like it tugged at my heartstrings seeing all of those aesthetics again, like little hints of the sub boss in the background and the gimmicks being returned and stuff like that. Like, how cool would it have been, like, if Forces, like, Eggman taking over the world means the levels you're battling in are reinterpretations of the final levels of previous games.
Now that I'd be fine with, like,
That'd be
because
fucking cool.
the main thing with just the whole Green Hill and Chemical Plant thing was we've seen them so many times, but like Death Egg is always welcome back. Scrap Brain is welcome back, sure. Like, bring them back. You know, we haven't.
Yeah,
recently
a more
just seen
confident
them.
Sonic team would have been able to be like, hey, here's technically Generations 2, but hard mode. And I mean, they whatever. We're not getting back into it. Like, if I wouldn't live in a world, I wouldn't live in a timeline where we had a confident Sonic team that had firmly established what 3D Sonic is. So it would have been really cool to see all this stuff through a modern 3D Sonic's interpretation of these classic zones and coming back through them with a classic Sonic with a nice polish on it. And we don't live in that world, unfortunately.
There is one thing about Scrap Brain Zone that I actually really like and would love to see interpreted in 3D. Interpreted. So when you begin Scrap Brain Zone, you actually aren't quite inside the level yet. And if you wait and look back where like the parallax scrolling happens, you can actually see the industrial complex like shooting up fire and fumes and stuff, like polluting the environment. But it's the way that it's shown, there's no detail to it. It's not like the buildings in, say, Chemical Plant, where you can see the little lights in the windows. It's very, very basic. I would love to see a 3D, or even like in a Mania 2, getting a new version of Scrap Brain Zone with all those details fleshed out, so I can see what that complex looks like from the outside. Because aside from stuff like Chemical Plant and the Death Egg, we don't really get to see giant Eggman fortresses like that as much as we used to.
Yeah. Well, before we wrap up our thoughts here, we should probably talk a little bit about the special stages.
They're fine.
They're
okay.
They are an assault on your senses. If you have a problem with overstimulation, you will have a problem with those levels. They're frustrating, but they're okay. Like, you can learn how to manipulate those levels and get the Chaos Emerald in 15 seconds.
I like the birdfish. My biggest criticism would be, why the fuck did they call the pits of death goal? Like, don't call it goal. I thought I was doing the right thing when I was jumping in there as a kid.
I did too. Yeah, that was very confusing for me for a little while. I forgot about that up until you mentioned that. Yeah, I'm with you guys. I think they're fine. I mean, in comparison, like, and I get what they were doing there, which is like, let's use our little ball boy in a different way. Give the players a little something extra to do. I think, like, and I've stated this 100 times before, I think the special stages were a nice solution for the problem of the day, which was what happens if somebody just rents our game, plays it for a weekend, and that's that. A lot of games would just make the game too fuck off hard, but while there's a lot of challenge, like a very unbalanced challenge in Sonic 1, I do think the idea of the special stages was a nice solution of like bringing extra challenge for completionist sake,
replayability,
as opposed to kids that just want to have fun.
It adds a new layer to the experience, and also, if you listen to the PAL version of the soundtrack, the music sounds like the musical equivalent of being drunk. So it's very dreamlike and kind of a little bit discordant in places. So it's
Sure.
really interesting. I highly advise everybody check out that PAL soundtrack. It's so strange.
There's one thing. There's one thing about the special stages that really does stick out to me, though. it's a good kind of stick out, and this is the way things operate for all special stages going forward. Is that at the end of the day, what has Sega been known for a long time during that era, and even going forward? They wanted to bring the arcade experience home. And the idea of having a short game, because again, my playthrough of this game a few hours ago, it was an hour and 12 minutes going through the whole thing, and with deaths. So that works on an arcade machine perfectly fine. And in an arcade machine, you're always trying to find little hidden stuff that'll make people come back. Not only does that work from, like what you said, the standpoint of making sure that people could rent this from Blockbuster, RIP, and then be able to get it back again later and have a reason to re-rent the game, but it also ends up working because the mentality behind this game is very much an arcade mentality. You want this game to be designed so there's a lot of trial and error in it, and you want there to be a lot of hidden stuff in there so that people who are replaying it for the 4th, 5th, 7th time are having a reason to replay the game. And I think they do a really good job at that. As awkwardly executed as the special stage is, I think that it not only solves that renting problem, but it also keeps the ethos of arcade at home very well.
Yeah. Well, I do have to wrap things up here pretty soon. I do have to get to work and all that fun stuff. But I guess a couple things I did want to say about Sonic 1 and things I just want to kind of always reiterate about it is, yeah, I can't always sit behind the defense of, like, you just had to be there. It's not fair to hold it up against the rest of the series, so on and so forth. But I keep thinking about how quickly you went through the game, Cirrus, and I think that's because you are you're tuned into how Sonic plays. And yes, you do have to play Sonic 1 a little bit differently from the rest of the series, partially because the mindset of the developers wasn't with the confidence, all out the gate. They had everything figured out, so you have to have some platforming experience in there. But even still, going backwards into this, you still can make your way through it with relative ease. There's still always going to be some kind of a challenge in there. How fair it is, I can't always, go to its defense with every single trap or pitfall there. But I do still think it's quite a bit of challenge to it that's worth keeping around. I think it stands the test of time on its own. When compared to the rest of the series, yeah, I do agree with a lot of people that there might not be a lot of reason to go back to it when you have Sonic 2 right there. But I still can't put that game in without smiling. I still can't remember the feeling of Green Hill for the first time, where it felt like the promise of the game art was coming to life on the screen. And every time I'd walk by a waterfall, I could swear I could feel like a light mist on the back of my neck. Like, I will always remember how that game made me feel. And whenever I had to die, because when I died in Marble or Spring Yard or Labyrinth or whatever else, yeah, it's frustrating, but like, you're always starting back in the most inviting, fun area of the game. And I think that arcade mentality that kind of drove the momentum and the movement of Sonic and that first level's design, I really think it worked in its favor, and I will always appreciate the game for that.
And I can definitely agree with that. Like, it's always good to have a game that just, whenever you pop it in, it almost feels like you're going back home.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of what you get in a lot of those games, especially Sonic 1. Just pop it in, welcome to Green Hill Zone, you're going to have a fun time. Even if some of the later bits remind you of how whack-ass your family is now that you're back home.
Oh, fair. Any final thoughts, Pup?
It is a good game. Like, as I say, it's one of those things where you got to take into account it's the first one. It's the very first one. There's like some kinks that still need ironing out, but you've also got to take into account it's the first fucking one. Leave it alone, Like, it's, like, it's not fair to compare Sonic 1 to Sonic 2. Just compare Sonic 2 to Sonic 1 and celebrate all of the things that Sonic 2 improved, And yeah, in the grand scheme of things, it's the worst of the original Sonic trilogy. But that's the way it should be. That's
Yep.
exactly how it should be. And it still stands up today. It's still a great game. It's revolutionary. It's a piece of video game history. So if you've never played it before and you want to get into classic Sonic, don't skip Sonic 1. Start off with Sonic 1. It will make Sonic 2 and 3 feel that much more rewarding, and as well as that, it's just nice to go back to the roots of the character properly. So, yeah, that's me. That's me done. Yeah.
That's a good point. If you don't mind me elaborating on that a little bit, I always tell people start with Sonic 2. But yeah, I mean, like if you have Sonic 1 in front of you and you're playing it and you're having fun with the way this character moves and feels, and you feel like you want more of it, like even if there's some like bullshitty parts you're having frustration with, you're gonna like Sonic 2 that much better. And I know that's not like really saying like, well, it's less garbagey, so maybe appreciate the garbage first. But watching that evolution play out through the classic trilogy is a lot of fun. At least it was for me growing up with it. And yeah, fuck this game is basically what we're saying.
I fucking hate Sonic 1.
It is a game that, while I would not ever recommend it as somebody's first Sonic game, it is a game that if you love Sonic right now, please go play it and get your own perspective on it. It is a very strange game as a time capsule, but I think it also functions really well as a time capsule, where we had this character designed to do a lot of things, but a game designed with the mentality of the platformers that came before it. And it's a very... I know people complain about like the block platforming stuff not being very Sonic when you get to Sonic Colors, but if you play Sonic 1... Yeah, no, there's actually a lot of parallels between Colors and 1 that can be
definitely.
driven. So,
So in terms of like recommending it, I would say do start with Sonic 1, but be aware that it is the worst one. So don't give up at 1, Like play Sonic 1, don't give up at 1 though. If you're not enjoying 1, just go straight on to 2. You still owe it to yourself and to Sonic to give it a try.
I'm gonna go beyond that. The caveats aside, Sonic 1 is one of those games where I feel like the general gaming audience is more forgiving of that game. It even flat out enjoys the game more than the hardcore Sonic fandom as it stands today. I'm just gonna tell you to shut the fuck up and play it, because this is video game history. Understand how important this game is. Like, this is up there with Super Mario Brothers, and I will not listen to a bad word about Mario Brothers 1. I make jokes about Mario World, sure, but that's the 4th in the series. Like, respect what these games did. Like, these games had it, like Sonic 1 had to crouch down and build momentum in a little ball so Sonic 2 could spin dash. Like, this is an important part of this entire hobby's entire existence, and the entirety of video gamedom has so much to thank because of this game. It transformed how this business is run. It shook Mario, it shook the empire of Nintendo, and it made them pay attention, and it told the rest of the industry and all these creatives and everybody else, like, hey, you don't need to do everything Nintendo tells you to do. We thank them for what they did for getting us out of a slump, but they're holding the leash too tight. This little hedgehog is just drilling the way through for the future. So show some fucking respect for your elders. This game is a tried and true blue classic, and I will not apologize for it.
And that, my friends, is why Sonic 1 is objectively bad.
Oh, man. All right. Well, guys, I got to get going, but before we do, if you've been sticking around for this, let us know how you felt about this retrospective. Let us know if you want us to continue on down the line with the Genesis games, maybe the Master System and Game Gear games, and further on into the future. Let us know how you feel about anything with the show, and if you like it, please be sure you share with your other weird Sonic friends who like to obsess over this stuff with us. We love talking about this, regardless of how much we debate. We're all here because we love the same thing. And be sure to follow us on all of our different social medias and other platforms where we love to create for you. Channel Pup is at Channel Pup on YouTube and everywhere else. Cirrus is at Cirrus the Skeptic. If you want more political leanings there, he's a very smart, very moral man. And Necosaurus, if you want some more video game related topics, if you want a smart man talking to you about video games. And he's also Necosaurus on Twitch. And I'm at Game Apologist on YouTube and just about everywhere else. And we'll have all the links for all that down below. And thank you so much for listening.